Live and virtual education, development, and support services. The company that represented here, Rosa, is currently serving as the Vice President of the Florida Blockchain Business Association, and Gabe, also founder of Tampa Bay Blockchain Group and a certified blockchain professional. I'll let them explain what they do because I'm not sure I would want to tackle that. There you go.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It was really exciting when Tony and Bob set this up for us, and they were like, "Can you guys explain blockchain in 30 minutes?" And we were like, "Oh, sure, no problem." But we do support startups in this space, and one of the startups that was in our space was just chosen for Rise of the Rest, which was Steve Case's kind of pitch competition, and he had to explain his decentralized blockchain developer tools in 4 minutes. So I think that we can handle this one. So we are a blockchain innovation studio. I am Rosa Shores. I'm one of the co-founders of Blockspaces. I left a career as a digital analyst at HSN in the e-commerce division to do this full time 2 years ago. I've been in the blockchain space since 2012, so that's almost like the whole entire life of the entire space. This space is only 10 years old. I am the Vice President of the Florida Blockchain Business Association. We focus on lobbying for reasonable regulation around innovation and technology specific to blockchain, and also cryptocurrency in Tallahassee. We were instrumental in passing Senate Bill 1024 in this last session. Governor DeSantis signed that into law, proposing a 13% blockchain task force, which will be making recommendations up to the governor about not just how to regulate this technology, but keep Florida open and friendly to innovation, so our startups stay here, our people can stay here and innovate, and we can attract businesses from outside of the state. That task force is getting appointed right now. We don't know who's on it for sure, but we do know that the mayor of Miami has been appointed to it, so we're really excited about that. So a lot going on in blockchain in Florida. All eyes are kind of on Florida around legislation and what's Florida going to do next. So what is Blockspaces? We bridge the gap between the startups that are developing in our space and corporate clients. So we see there's a big gap in between those two players, a lot of really talented technologists working on some pretty amazing things. We have a startup in our space that's working on a virtual reality physical therapy product that incorporates blockchain. We have some people working on some 3D modeling security systems. So we kind of see it as this foundational technology that kind of brings together all of these other emerging technologies. As I said, cryptocurrency is that's probably what everybody immediately thinks of when they think about blockchain, and probably for good reason because of Bitcoin. But that was really just the first application of blockchain. We're now seeing it really fundamentally changing how businesses transact and manage their data. And there's about 55 different industries now exploring blockchain use cases. And it really runs the gamut. Right now, fintech, of course, because of cryptocurrency and payment processing and cross-border payments, fintech really kind of led the way for that. Of course, JP Morgan now has their own protocol called Quorum. We're actually doing a Quorum presentation this month. If you look on our site, you can follow that. They have their own, it is next month, October 4th. They have their own cryptocurrency now called JP Morgan Coin. That's for cross-border payments. So fintech is really leading the way with this innovation, but right behind it is manufacturing and supply chain and logistics. So this is definitely the right group to be talking to today, but these are just some of the other industries that we're seeing emerge. Blockspaces will be announcing a very, very cool digital ID project here in the next couple of weeks that we'll be working on, and that's self-sovereign ID, which gives your data and your personal identity back to yourself. Probably everybody in this room has been compromised, even if you don't know it. Your data is probably on the deep web somewhere. So the digital ID is an amazing project, giving ownership of your identification back to yourself. And of course, we always have a kind of a pet project in the background, which is sort of like our golden egg project of blockchain-based voting, which of course digital ID has to be established first before you can do that. So that's in the works at Blockspaces. These are some specific, I'm not going to read this to you, but these are some very specific things in the manufacturing industry that we're seeing emerge. Supply chain monitoring and transparency, of course, at HSN, that was one of the things that I found really exciting and interesting when I first started understanding blockchain technology. For me, it was about not just sustainability, but for social consciousness. We're seeing some blockchain projects now. Nestle, I know, just released one a proof of concept that actually tracked their milk on their supply chain all the way back to the farm, and it's showing that customers are able to scan the QR code, see where that product, where every point in time that it was in the supply chain, and customers are buying that product more because it's showing that there is the provenance of the product. So materials provenance and counterfeit detection. This is actually even in 3D modeling, when you're working on a project together, making sure that everybody that touches that product is not doing anything, is not compromising the product in any way. Again, engineering design, we're seeing that aircraft parts. Gabe's going to go over some very specific use cases that corporates are working on later on in the presentation, but these are just some things that we're seeing specifically in manufacturing. So we constantly see, oh, what happened to my little...
Keep going.
Oh, okay. So we're constantly seeing, these are the big headlines in the news, right? $176 billion worth of business value added by 2025 through blockchain, $3.1 trillion by 2030. In a survey by Gartner of global executives, 95% said they plan to invest in blockchain in the next 12 months. 88% of companies are planning to invest at least $500,000 toward blockchain technology research and development. These are the headlines we see everywhere. But what we're also seeing, what we're personally seeing, is a tremendous amount of executive confusion. I kid you not, we got a call from a CIO of a very large commercial real estate company, a global commercial real estate company that literally WebExed into one of our blockchain and real estate meetups, and he told us, I have a $20 million blockchain budget and I have no idea what to do with it. And so there's a huge amount of confusion, whether they're lacking the knowledge or the implementation skills, whether they're lacking in-house developer skills, and of course there's now 14 job openings for every one blockchain developer. So this stuff moves very fast. Like I said, there's only like a 10-year lifespan of the whole entire space. And it's emerging very quickly. So staying on top of the technology and having people that understand it is very difficult to come by. And for good reason, because like I said, we were back in the space in about 2012, so we've seen this whole thing kind of emerge, and we're here. And when I say we are here, I don't mean Blockspaces, I mean the space as a whole is somewhere between prototype and pilot. So even though there's all of these proof of concepts and prototypes that are now kind of starting to see some ROI in this space, we're still very, very early. So there's a reason for that executive confusion. And so that's one of the things that Blockspaces is here for, to help executives kind of understand the space, get a very agnostic, we don't align with any particular vendor or any particular blockchain. We're an IBM registered business partner, but we also work with R3 Corda, we work with Quorum, love to work with Microsoft, but we're not aligned with any particular vendor or partner. We're just very agnostic. So we develop on all different kind of blockchain protocols. I'm going to hand it over to Gabe. That's a little brief overview of this space as a whole and what Blockspaces does. Gabe has been teaching people Blockchain 101 since 2012, and he's taught hundreds and hundreds of people about blockchain. So I'm going to let him kind of walk you guys through the technical part of this.
Thank you. So we got to talk to a couple of you, and I've noticed that some of you haven't even heard of what blockchain is. How many have heard of blockchain at least? Okay, decent number. It's been getting around, getting the headlines. There's a lot of buzz around it, a lot of hype, maybe over hyped a little bit, for good reason in some cases, and bad reasons in other cases. But I'm going to walk you through the actual technology at a high level. I'm going to keep it high, but you still have to have your brains turned on here a little bit. So just a little bit about the nature of the technology itself. So we're used to centralized systems, right? where there's a central authority figure that controls the data or information and the flow of that information to all the endpoints. But what we're seeing with the internet age is that things are becoming more decentralized, more distributed across network planes. And even the network itself is becoming more distributed. So there's no necessarily authority figure in charge. There's nobody in charge of the internet. There's nobody that owns the internet, right? It's just a technology. So what the blockchain is, simply put, is a chain of blocks. And the chain are the blocks are contents, it's information, it's data. And the way those are linked is where the magic happens here. And so all this information is kept on a distributed ledger system that nobody necessarily can tamper with very easily. So this is protecting data from hackers and across distributed systems. And the magic here is as Rosa alluded to earlier, when Bitcoin was invented, it solved a long-standing computer science problem that has always been the case, which is, how do I transmit information across a hostile network and know that that information was received as intended and hasn't been tampered with in transit? This is called several things, but this is a long-standing computer science problem, and we're used to data and information being copied ad infinitum, right? If I take a picture, I send it to you, I retain that copy of the picture, but you also do too. You post it online, now millions of people have access to that same information, that data. With a blockchain, that is no longer the case. We've solved what's called the double spending problem, where that information, that data, digital data, is copied ad infinitum, and nobody truly owns it. With blockchain technology, you actually can own a digital thing, a digital asset, which is a weird concept for a lot of people, but now that's the case. This is the reality now. So, and this is how it kind of does that, the magic behind how that happens. So a blockchain database is an organized record that comprises the reference of previous blocks of digital signatures. So we can take digital information and put a unique fingerprint on it that cannot be tampered with or forged or manipulated in any sort of way. And if it is, we can know immediately that it was. So with this kind of data structure, we can take the fingerprints of a data set, hash it through a cryptographic hash function, which is just fancy math, and then take that fingerprint and imprint it into the next data set and into a consecutive chain of blocks, blockchain. So whereas if you try to change anything in this data set backwards, retroactively, you invalidate the rest of the information along that chain. So it secures the integrity of data forever. So this is a very powerful tool that we can use, and of course, the first obvious use case was digital money. But now we're seeing how it's being applied in many different ways. And so we're also seeing how it's being iterated on in and of itself. So blockchains, not all blockchains are created equal. Now we have a variety of different blockchains that you can choose from. Now we have public blockchains, which are open and distributed. They require low trust between transacting with the person on the other side. You don't have to know them. You don't have to have any credentials about them. The system itself is the trusting mechanism. It's more democratic, but of course there's a lot of concerns with this kind of network. So we're seeing where other kinds of blockchains are being developed, more privatized blockchains, where you do know the actors on that system, on that network that you can transact with. So the trust level is high there, but it acts more like a little kingdom, right? And there's concerns with that too. You have to have the right governing structures there, the data standards, of course the privacy standards, all have to be agreed on by everybody on that network. And so business networks today you can think of as data silos, right? Every business has its own data set that they try to keep and maintain. But when they're trying to transact with other businesses, it looks kind of like this. It's kind of a mess. And there's a lot of friction with this kind of transacting, especially if you're doing it a lot, right? And it's costly. With blockchain networks, everybody's connected to the same source of truth. A blockchain is a same data set that everybody shares and trusts because of the way that it's structured, right? So you can transact safely on these networks without having to rely on other siloed information or other data sets that you're trying to interact with. So this is creating a lot of efficiencies in business. And so you can see that it's driving efficiencies, reducing processing times and costs, of course, and then which boosts productivity and therefore profits. So this is why businesses are turning to leveraging blockchain technology in some way, shape, or form. A lot of people don't know how to do that, which is, of course, why we exist. We try to help kind of unmystify this. So some industries that are leading blockchain, as I mentioned earlier, fintech or financial services is definitely leading the way here. In a recent PwC study, it shows that they're far ahead of most other industries. But right behind them, number 2, as you can see, is the industry and the manufacturing, or industrial products and manufacturing industries, tied with energy and utilities. So, and you can see the span of industries that this is starting to cross, and this list is growing all the time. So the applications that are being built right now are almost endless, it seems. Of course, there's unique applications to this kind of technology. It's not a cure-all. It doesn't solve all of your problems. It has to be deployed in a very particular way for it to work right. But we're seeing how industries are figuring it out. They're figuring this out. So 30% of manufacturing companies, more than $5 billion in revenue, they'll have implemented an Industry 4.0 pilot project using blockchain. And that it will be way up from about 5% today. This is very early on in this industry using blockchain applications, so we're seeing how this is kind of getting ready to explode as people or different companies are exploring this opportunity. We see it in the automotive industry. Lots of major manufacturers, auto manufacturers are leveraging the technology in different ways even. So they're not copying each other, they're coming up with their own use cases, leveraging the same technology. So BMW and Ford are using it to ensure the responsible sourcing of cobalt. So we've dealt with steel manufacturing companies that are looking to deploy a blockchain solution that tracks their steel manufacturing, the different gradients, where is that at in transit along the supply chain, and get real-time data and information on that using blockchain. We know that data hasn't been tampered with, so they know that their supplier isn't cheating them, or their vendors are not doing something that's not being elucidated in their current system. Jaguar, Land Rover, they're developing smart wallets to go inside of their cars to be able to interact with other IoT devices exterior from the car, such as a smart city, could have parking lots that can use cryptocurrency to pay for your parking spot as soon as you roll up. So automatically, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to pull out or stop at a little booth anymore. This is all going to be automated. GM is patenting blockchain-powered solutions to manage the data of autonomous vehicles. Of course, you don't want hackers while your autonomous vehicle is driving you to hack your car and run you off the road. So blockchain technology is going to be a foundational technology that helps protect that information from being compromised like that. So, food safety, IBM and Walmart have issued a pretty large pilot program doing just that with food. As Rosa mentioned earlier, you can tag the food from its source with all the metadata and information, and track it along the whole supply chain. Of course, there was the E. coli outbreak a couple years ago with some romaine lettuce that shut down the entire romaine. Who remembers that? Shut down the entire industry for a couple of months because they were trying to track it back to its source. Where did it come from? We don't know. We have to go through all the paperwork to figure out where that infected romaine lettuce came from. So they had to shut down the entire industry. It cost millions and millions of dollars, and it took them a long time. Now, with Walmart implementing a blockchain food tracking system, they were able to take that process from 7 days to 2 seconds. They could know exactly which plot of land that romaine lettuce came from. So it's a very, and not only the companies can do that, but they can give that power to their customers. Like Rosa said, the bag of lettuce that you buy in the grocery store can be tagged with a QR code that has that information. And so you can see all along the supply chain, every point that bag of lettuce touched. So this is putting a lot of power back into the hands of the consumers, which of course they like, and so they buy more. They feel that trust coming through their product. SAP, Pharma Tracking and Trace, pharmaceuticals, a huge industry of course, leveraging technology to help mitigate against any kind of fraudulent activities with the pharmaceutical industry. This is also helping with the regulatory burdens that are on the pharmaceutical industry, the manufacturers as well. They have a lot of compliance that they have to go through. Blockchain technology is helping them kind of automate a lot of that compliance and help them just make it much more frictionless for their business, and they're using a certain kind of blockchain to do this. So Maersk is also using it in trade, international trading and shipping, and they're seeing huge benefits, increased volume by 15% by lowering the barriers leveraging blockchain technology. But this is happening all over the place with local shipping supply agencies and distribution points as well. And then Honeywell's talked to a gentleman here tonight with aircraft parts. They're tracking aircraft parts. It's a huge problem with used aircraft parts and tracking them. And Honeywell is deploying a blockchain solution to be able to track those parts more effectively. So they know which components came from where, when, who touched them, was those technicians certified, what was that certifying credential. All of that can be deployed on a blockchain solution. Yes, sir?
So what would be on the part, RFID, and what would be the limit to the size of the part? What's actually on it that allows you to track that level of data?
That's a good question. I guess there wouldn't be too many limitations. You don't have to have like a tracking mechanism on the physical part itself. You just need to know that where that piece came from, or the packaging at least. If it's a laser etched, you can laser etch an ID on it, fairly small. The diamond industry has been using a blockchain solution for a couple of years now, actually. They were one of the first use cases. So they're laser printing an identifier, a unique identifier on each piece of diamond, and then you'll be able to track it forever. So that's a good question. So you're kind of getting the idea here that blockchain technology is disrupting a lot of processes that we're kind of used to, but are broken fundamentally as we move into an internet age more and more. And this is enabling the end customer, the end consumer to gain a lot of that control of knowing where these things are. Of course, same with the manufacturers themselves. In payments, of course, we talked about how fintech is leading the way here, and this is just an example of how even using different companies using different blockchains, there's now a way to interoperate the different blockchains to be able to talk to each other. And so you're able to facilitate transactions in a much faster way for faster payment and settlements. In this particular use case, they were able to do so by 40% increase. And so that's just to give you a high-level overview, believe it or not, of what this the blockchain technology is about, what it can do, the kind of players that are deploying solutions, and this is what we want to help our local people here in Tampa Bay realize, that this technology is here, it's being used, and it can be used to help benefit us here. So why not, right? So, and you can reach out to us. We're pretty easily, readily available. Our booth's over there with the big glowy blocks. And I'm happy to take questions if I went a little fast. I don't know how much time I took actually, but I know there's a lot of questions usually. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. So for the example with the romaine lettuce, so a grower is growing the lettuce, and then there's a packing company or distributor that's distributing the lettuce. Who starts that data? Who inputs that data for that blockchain? Is it the grower, or is it something that the packer like puts in a contract that they have to put the data into a blockchain? Who starts it or initiates?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it could be anybody along that supply chain that kind of, you have to get all the different user groups on board, all the vendors along the chain, or else there's a break in the chain, right? That's why you see some of these bigger players kind of implement this, because they can kind of shove their weight. But if you can do that from the ground up too, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. You just gotta organize that network of participants to be able to facilitate that. Just like upgrading any other kind of system, like your SAP has to talk to their system, right? Or whatever. Any kind of integration like that needs to happen. And so as long as you can facilitate that from a technology perspective, then it should work. But it is more of like an organizing people more than technology problem. Yes?
Is it affordable technology yet? Because I see a lot of the names up there are, Fortune 500 companies. So when it gets down to that lower level.
Yeah. Well, so it depends on the scale, right? These larger companies, like, they have scale that they have to contend with. Smaller companies don't have to deal with worldwide global scale usually. So no, you can deploy this technology regardless of scale. It just depends on how far you want to take this and how big your network is. Yes, sir.
So in the banking space, you have 100, 250,000 bank limit, federally protected. Is there actually anything like that in this cryptocurrency? If something happens, it disappears, you actually have some sort of regulatory backing?
Sure, yeah. So we've seen JP Morgan has released their own cryptocurrency, which is doing just that. They're facilitating international payments. Right now they're focusing on settling between their own banking partners, but they're going to open this up to the end consumer as well in the future, very soon actually. So it just depends. But yes, they're working closely with the regulators. The regulators are all over this. I don't know how many of you heard about Facebook Coin. Facebook is also talking about releasing their own cryptocurrency, and it got the Congress all up in arms about it. They demanded hearings about it. Congress is well aware of this. The SEC is all over this. The CFTC, the IRS. This has been taxed as a commodity, for instance, in cryptocurrency terms. All the particulars of the regulatory landscape are being formulated right now. They haven't come up with overarching regulations, but those are well underway.
Thanks a lot, Gabe. And
Thank you.
yeah, Gabe and Rosa, and we're going to go into a Jeopardy game. Yeah, but before we do that, though, I want to thank again Blockspaces, and I want to thank MLC CAD, and I want to thank Microsoft. If we could have applause for all of us presenters. I think they all did a great job, and we gave them